Hi everyone, thanks for watching. You can support our work on our website ageoftruth.tv. And please like our videos, subscribe to our channels on YouTube, BitChute and Brighteon. And remember to hit the bell for notifications. And follow us on Instagram and Facebook. To be sure not to miss any of our shows, you can sign up for our newsletter on our website ageoftruth.tv.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Age of Truth TV. I'm Lucas Alexander in Copenhagen, Denmark. And our special guest today is a fascinating gentleman with an extraordinary life story. An author, lecturer, conspiracy researcher, spiritual teacher, and hyperspace intuitive who claims to have been a victim of mind control as one of the so-called Montauk Boys, part of the alien and extraterrestrial related Montauk Project. Stewart Swerdlow. Good evening from Copenhagen, Denmark, and good morning to you, Stewart Swerdlow, joining us from your home in St. Joseph, Michigan. Welcome to the show, and thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Your personal life story and the alternative version of world history and the history of the universe with its alien connection is, of course, extraordinary and mind-boggling. But before we get into those major topics, please tell us who you are in terms of your family background and your bloodline.
Well, that's a very big story, actually. Most of your listeners may know that my great uncle Yakov Sverdlov was the first president of the Soviet Union. His brother was my grandfather. My grandfather was sent to the United Kingdom to start the Communist Party there. And when he was successful, then he was sent to the United States to start the Communist Party in the United States. Then my grandmother was a Soviet spy in World War II. And I do remind everybody that in World War II, the Soviet Union and the West were on the same side. So they were actually working together against the Germans. And in fact, my grandmother was blackmailing many of the high-ranking German officers during the war. And at the end of the war, when the Soviet Union could not pay her for her services, they sent her to Antwerp in Belgium to a Soviet jeweler. Who I suppose was working undercover. Maybe he was a Soviet spy there, I don't know. But he gave her in payment a huge marquise diamond, which many years later she gave to my mother as a gift. I have another great uncle, Benjamin Sverdlov, who actually started Sverdlov Bank in New York in the 1916, 1917, and he was the one who encouraged the President of the United States to send $20 million, which was big at that time, to a Swiss bank so that the Red soldiers could finance the revolution. And my great-grandfather, Mikhail Sverdlov, printed the documents and the passports for the Red Army so that they could move about the country without being interrogated or stopped. Now, Yakov's son, Andrei, actually started KGB. So he was my cousin, my father's cousin, of course, was a very long time ago. So that is my very strange and, maybe difficult family history.
Would you suggest that actually your family is sort of part of an Illuminati bloodline?
No, in fact, they were quite against Illuminati. And in fact, Yakov ordered the assassination of the Romanov family in the city of Yekaterinburg in the Ural Mountains. And because of that, they changed the name of Yekaterinburg to Sverdlovsk. And to this day, the oblast is called Sverdlovsk, which turned out to be a very secretive city during Soviet times, a secret province, very much like Area 51 is in the United States. This was where the Soviets had underground bases, contact with alien beings, and so on.
You were, of course, part of the Montauk Project, and you were one of the so-called Montauk Boys, and you were a victim of mind control programming and compartmentalisation. Please talk a little bit about that particular history, why you were chosen to be part of this project, and what the Montauk Project actually was.
Well, just to clarify, I don't use the word victim. It's very negative, and I have come to know all these decades later that nobody's a victim. We are all willing participants in whatever experiences we have. And so we have, unfortunately, a mind pattern that allows these things to happen. And so my work is to change all of that. Montauk Project began in 1970 until 1983. And I worked with many people there. In fact, very sadly, just last week, Duncan Cameron passed away, a very dear friend who I knew for 49 years. My
condolences to you and also to his family. I know that you were very close.
Yes, and it's a strange feeling because Al is gone and Preston is gone and Duncan is gone and I'm kind of the last one. And so it's like being the last living dinosaur from that time period.
You can also be the voice of these people that you grew up with.
Yes, it was a very difficult time. We were taught during this project that humanity was incapable of taking care of itself, and if left on its own, would destroy itself. So we were indoctrinated to believe that the work we were doing was beneficial to humankind and would actually save the planet and all the species on the planet. And that mind control and the programming was actually helpful to continue with the civilization.
Really?
This concept actually came from reptilian mindset. As you may know, the reptilians were the first creatures that came to this planet to settle and to colonize. And they have mind control and programming as a way of life for over 1 billion years. And in that way, their culture and civilization can move forward in time without deviation or distraction.
And they do it telepathically, correct?
They do, but in those days, it was not like that. Understand that actually mind control programming is very old on this planet. It's not new. The techniques now are newer. But I talk in my lectures about the Salahuddin in Persia during the 1100s who programmed and mind controlled the warriors and assassins to kill people for his glorification and so on. So that's really the start of modern, what we call modern mind control. The Germans during World War II perfected mind control in the concentration camps. And for example, they took captured Soviet soldiers, especially in Mauthausen concentration camp near Linz, Austria. And there they performed what was called mind control experiments of great extremes. For example, they would put the soldiers out in freezing weather for a long period of time. Then they would put them in hot conditions. Then they would put them for starvation, and then they would overfeed them. Then sleep deprivation, and then make them sleep too much. So it created extremes. It's called psychic driving. And this psychic driving fractures the mind. And the Germans learned that when human mind is fractured to the utmost level, it creates a symbol within the mind pattern of a cube that is 13 by 13 by 13 in compartments. And that creates 2,197 possible compartments that can be programmed to various altars and constructs, etc.
That's an incredible number. That many personalities in one person?
Correct. That's the top that you can be. Those are people we say are specifically programmed. Now, not all are able to sustain that. It depends on the genetics of a person. And they learned, as far as the Germans were concerned, and Aryans and this kind of thing, they knew that people with light complexion, light-colored eyes, lighter hair, etc., had an enzyme in their DNA that allowed for more programming to take place. And that's the reason why the Germans promoted that type of a personality, because in that way they could control the people instead of the darker skinned people they could not control so well.
Is that what they say is the blood type O negative?
Well, that's another curiosity, the positive and the negative. People who have, well, first of all, O type is the oldest on the earth, and the AB negative is the newest. O positive is the oldest, AB negative is the newest. And negative means no rhesus factor. So that means that they're more reptilian. People with positive have more mammalian genetics open. People negative have more reptilian open. And that's why they promote these things like this. Interestingly, the reason they also promote vegetarianism and these kinds of things is because the vegetarianism reduces the amount of iron in your bloodstream, which makes you weaker and more controllable. So it has nothing to do with health. In fact, health, you need the protein. And so this is part of the so-called New Age movement, which is not really existing anymore. It's a very complicated topic.
So it's not because they see it as some sort of cannibalism to eat meat.
They do. They do. And of course, this comes from ancient Sumer. I must go back because, you know, Sumer was colonized by the human refugees from Mars. And Sumer suddenly existed. Before Sumer, there was nothing. Then suddenly these cities existed. And when the reptilians decided to take over this region, they used hybridization where they mixed human with mammalian. The leaders were called blue blood because human blood has more carbon and the reptilian is more copper. When copper oxidizes, it turns like a blue-green color. So these leaders are called blue bloods. See, and they created ceremonies, rituals, especially to the god Moloch, for sacrifice.
The owl.
And every year they would sacrifice children to this god with fire. In Sumerian language, a priest was called Kana. And the god Baal. So if you were a priest to Baal, you were called Kana Baal. And they would eat the burnt flesh of the children to purify the soul of the people. And this is where we get the name cannibal, from Kana Baal. You understand? But more interestingly, We have to look at also people who have every year go to a carnival, carne, meat, carne, the meat of Baal. This is the same thing. So we don't understand, most people don't understand the derivation of language and what these words mean. I think if they did, they would change things.
So please talk about your experiences at Montauk, and then we can also, after that, go into your take on alternative world history, which is nothing like what we are being taught in schools and in history books. But please explain to us, how did you come about all of this information? How do you know? Who taught you this? Where did that information come from?
As I mentioned, I spent 13 years in the Montauk Project, and we were indoctrinated constantly about history, about biology, true science, because quite honestly, all of these things in the modern world, the way they're taught and displayed, are not really true. But to go to your original question of why was I involved in Montauk, yes, it comes from my family history, because of the Soviet Union, because my father was used in secret work by the American government. He was used in a base underneath El Paso, Texas. And to this day, he will not say what he experienced there.
Oh, he's still alive?
He's very elderly and not really all there. But he never spoke about such things.
Have you ever spoken to him about all of what you experienced and why you went through all of this, now that you've gone public with it for many years?
I tried, and he doesn't want to ever discuss this. In fact, he will not even go to the graves of his parents. He refuses to have any association with anything related to the Soviet Union and that kind of thing.
But he never said to you, Stewart, what you're saying is not the truth. You never went through this.
No.
He just doesn't want to talk about it.
He says nothing. Now, my mother, before she passed away, I did confront her, because every Friday afternoon, she would take me to a doctor, Dr. Green, who would examine me in excruciating manner. And whenever we went, I was the only one in the office. And so I finally, as an adult, confronted her, and she denied it. It's not true, you're crazy, blah, blah. And so I said to her, I remember that we went every Friday to this doctor. She said, well, it wasn't every Friday. So finally she admitted. And then she told me, yes, we would let you go out and play in the playroom, and then we would watch behind the door to see what you were doing. And interestingly, every time I was playing with these blocks, I would make a cemetery. Now, what child, when playing with the blocks, makes headstones in a cemetery? Now, all these years later, and understanding about mind control and programming, I know that that is called a construct within the matrix of the program, where there are alters or alter groups that are no longer necessary, so they bury them in a cemetery construct until such time that they are needed. So I was obviously activated in that particular programming style. So, and then also I was sent to a dentist who would drill my teeth without anesthesia every week and did terrible things to me. And many years later, when I went to have my fillings replaced, the dentist said, who did this unnecessary work to you? Again, it was a confirmation about what happened back then.
Is it true, you've once said that this Dr. Green was in fact the infamous and horrifying Joseph Mengele, the Nazi scientist who went to America after the war. And also, according to David Icke, he had a witness once called Arizona Wilder, who also said that she was under mind control, and her handler, I assume, was Dr. Green, Joseph Mengele. Are you saying that this is the same person, or how do you view this now?
I know that he was Dr. Mengele. If it was the same person that Arizona Wilder, I can't tell you that. I knew Arizona Wilder. I actually stayed in her house.
But can you confirm that that what she said to David Icke in that one video, and maybe a few other places during that time period, that she is the real thing? Is she the real thing?
I don't like to make comments about other people, but I will say that from my experience with her, I can tell you she was extremely programmed. And something did happen to her in a traumatic way. That is true.
But it is true that some of the things that she said, and that are things that you have said as well. Seeing famous people at Satanic Rituals taking place. I believe you once mentioned that Sir Lawrence Gardner was there, and William F. Buckley and others.
Yes, I remember seeing them. And of course, that caused a lot of trouble for me when I publicly said this. And Lawrence Gardner said some things about myself and about other people that I knew. There is a very well-known female professor at Oxford, who's a friend of mine. She is an expert on the Templars and Rosslyn Chapel and so on. And he used to say terrible things about her and her work. And after he died, his widow sent an apology to her, saying that she was sorry for all the things that he said, because he was basically an apologizer for the Illuminati and for what has become known now as the deep state. And there have been many researchers, and I'm not going to say who they are, who have not been exactly straightforward in the information that they talk about. One by one, you will all find out who they are.
You claim that you have seen Sir Lawrence Gardner and other people shapeshift into a reptilian form. And this is, of course, this has become legendary, which is also what David Icke brought to the scene, which became so controversial. Please talk about that. Do you think that what you saw and witnessed there, part of your Montauk experience, you say that you saw these people actually turn into an alien form, reptilian?
Yes, that's correct. And that happens during a blood sacrifice ritual and sexual magic ritual. And here, let me explain. And I explained this to David also. When a person, use the term loosely, has a genetic composition of 50% reptilian and 50% mammalian, the body does not have a foundation or a set form to follow. So then it depends on the mindset or the soul personality of the person. So for example, if there's a human soul personality in this body, it will look more like human. If it's reptilian, it will stay as a reptilian. However, the one that stays as a reptilian, if it ingests human hormones, blood, etc., then the genetics will defer to the mammalian side, and the person will then become more human looking. And so that's why these rituals need to be taking place every so often, so that those who would automatically shift to reptilian form, that they would stay, and for their public demeanor, they would stay in human form. And there are many people like that. People think all politicians, they are not all like that. There's a few that are like that, and they're in all walks of life, not just in high power positions.
So how much have you witnessed that? What have you seen there at Montauk? And also, just for people who has never heard about Montauk before, please explain that it's a military base on Long Island. just so that we can set the location?
It's at the very eastern tip of Long Island, New York. It sticks out into the Atlantic Ocean. It sticks out almost like a peninsula on the southern shore. It was started, actually, the base in 1799 by George Washington to prevent or to watch for British invasion. And over the decades and the centuries, it was excavated further. Underground areas were enlarged to put supplies in case of an invasion. And eventually, as they were digging, they found the tops of what looked like pyramids. And these were actually the remnants of Atlantean pyramids from that time frame, from over 10,000 years ago, because the Montauk area is part of an archipelago that extends into the rest of the Atlantic Ocean to where Atlantis used to be located. So this was actually part of Atlantis. Now, they also built submarine pens underneath the ground, so that even in World War II, the local people would notice German U-boats coming and then submerging and going in towards the shore, and nobody stopped them. They would also see them leaving, and nobody stopped them. It's also interesting to know that there were only two places during the war that the Germans actually landed in North America, and one of them was near Montauk Point. And eventually these people were captured in New York City, and incredibly, after the war, they were executed instead of returning to Germany. Yeah, another place where they landed was near Jacksonville, Florida. And that also was the only other place in the US. What this proves is that on some level, the United States and Germany during the war were really working together. And the war publicly was for, a staged event, if you will.
In order to do what? What was the end goal of them, if they of working together, if that was actually what was going on?
The end goal is the same as it is now, to create a global nation, dictatorship with robot-like people who don't question anything and who are programmed and mind-controlled. It's the same as what's happening now.
New World Order.
New World Order, but now the media calls it the deep state. They change, now it's called deep state. You know, this happened in the last few years. So whatever you call it, it's the same thing. Doesn't matter.
How many levels were there underneath the ground of the Montauk base?
There were 9 levels, almost identical in categories to the levels in Dulce Base in New Mexico. So, of course, Dulce Base was built many years prior for a different reason, but Montauk, even though it was from time of George Washington, had been expanded and expanded. It wasn't built specifically for that reason until 1970. And, you know, after the war, well, the whole idea of politics and so on is to create fear in the public. Because when there's a common enemy, everybody will acquiesce to what the government or the authorities tell them to do to save themselves. After the war, there were no more Nazis, well, not publicly. They needed something else to make people afraid. So that's when they created the alien invasion scenario, 1947 Roswell.
Which was not a real event, you say, or what? Did that actually happen?
It did actually happen, but it was staged. In other words, that vehicle was sent to crash on the Earth. It was not shot down. You know, it was not an accident. It was sent. And this is a huge topic of what's going on.
Was it a military craft, a human military craft, really, or was it actually alien?
You know, I'll tell you something. The major governments of the Earth have been in communication with alien beings for a very long time, not since 1947. It goes back many, many centuries, you know, and even the Egyptians, ancient Egyptians were in contact, the Atlanteans were in contact, and so on. So quite honestly, humanity are the newcomers. The so-called aliens are the ones who were here first, and so on. So again, part of a history that is not correct as far as what you learn in school and so on.
What took place underneath the ground of Montauk, in those 9 levels you talk about?
We had many different projects. There were hybridization projects where they would mix different species together to come up with hybrids. This eventually was moved to a place called Plum Island, which is just off the coast of Montauk. Between Montauk and Rhode Island, there's a small island called Plum Island, and that's where the hybridization took place subsequently. There was also programming and mind control experiments, which obviously was used for the purpose of eventually controlling the entire planet. There was weather manipulation, which led eventually to the HARP project. You see, Montauk started with many initial experiments that then became extrapolated to major projects elsewhere. So they would start at Montauk and then go out to other places. There was even a European version of Montauk in Alsace-Lorraine, on the border of Germany and France. And that project was actually attacked by an alien craft and destroyed.
Really?
Yes. And so it's interesting to me that this is where the European Union has placed their headquarters in Strasbourg, you know, which is interesting. And of course, Europeans have no idea that they're in a dictatorship, because in the EU, you don't vote for the people who make your law. You do not vote for them. They are placed by others. But most Europeans don't know this.
But the same is happening in America, right? And all over the world.
America, you know, people don't vote. I mean, well, they vote, but I say this joke, but it's not a joke, that when you press the lever on the toilet bowl, at least you know where that's going. When you press the lever on the election machine, it's maybe not even plugged in. You understand?
Right.
Well, I will tell you, Lucas, that this is changing. With the administration that we have now, there is a deep military intelligence operation on the positive side, which is removing the deep state in the US, and the deep state in Europe is extremely threatened, especially Macron and Merkel and so on. So you will see many, many changes in governments very soon.
So are you suggesting that Donald Trump is actually a good guy and
yes,
that
not
he
suggesting, I'm saying so.
Really? Well, he seems very abrasive and out of control and not very charming.
To those who don't understand, yes. But those who understand, we know what he's doing.
So the so-called white hats is behind him.
That's what they call it, you know. But there is this group, you may have heard of it, called Q. And it's made up of approximately 9 members, 6 of which are US military, 3 are not. And they are, you should go to qmap.pub and read the posts, and you will see that what they say eventually happens within the next few days, because they're inside the government. And people like the Clintons and the Obamas, they are in big trouble.
To get back to the levels at Montauk, you were talking about mind control and creating hybrids. What else took place there?
I personally was involved in experimentation of what they called hyperspace and in communication on non-verbal levels, interspecies and interdimensionally. This is what we call language of hyperspace.
Telepathy, is it?
Telepathy is very low level, but we would say it has to do more with opening up the entire DNA and mind pattern structure of the human being. Because remember, humans generally use less than 10% of their brain capacity and only 3% of their DNA. This is extremely inefficient. So if you are capable of opening a lot more percentage, imagine what you can do. It goes way beyond telepathy. It's everything that you can imagine.
So is it out of body experiences you can have, remote viewing and time travel?
Yes, you can say those things, because what we learned was that every point in time and space is unique. No two are alike. So if you know the coordinates of where you want to go, and then you take a person, place, or thing, and you resonate it to that coordinate, there's instant connection. That's why time travel and space travel for billions of light years can be accomplished in 1 second. It does not take such time. And so that's what we learned in Montauk. Now, many coordinates were given by certain alien groups, but unfortunately we learned many of those coordinates were not correct. There was false information given, because most of these groups out there are fearful of humanity on this planet.
Why?
Humans on this planet are considered to be hostile, negative, ignorant, and dangerous. And this planet, for purpose of analogy, is like the Syria of the galaxy. It's considered a very hostile, dangerous place that needs to be controlled. There have been civilizations on this world way before even Atlantis and even anything that you can imagine. And that is why when people sometimes have abduction experiences and they ask these beings, where do you come from? They say, we come from here. And how could this be? They come from here because their civilization originated here and then they left. And now they come back.
So please talk about the different alien races and the different types that you actually know of, or maybe even were in the presence of. What have you witnessed? What have you seen? Please mention some of these extraterrestrial races, or are they interdimensional?
All the above. You know, in my Blue Blood book, I have depictions of some of them, if you've seen that. But that's just a very small percentage. You know, there are literally billions of civilizations in creation, both in this universe and alternate ones. So when you ask to describe, it would take 10 lifetimes to even start to describe the billions of different civilizations.
So maybe the most prominent ones, maybe visiting Earth.
I'll give you the categories. Generally, they're described as reptilian, insectoid, humanoid, and non-physical. Those are the 4 categories that the government uses to describe these beings, and within those categories are all kinds of variations. But I will say that the ones maybe most in connection with the government before our present administration was the reptilian group. Now, even in reptilians, there are many civilizations. In the Milky Way galaxy, which we exist, about 70% of the population is more humanoid. 25% is reptiloid, and the 5% are other miscellaneous, insectoid, and so on. So it's a very vast possibility. But the US government, Soviet government, and so on, they were in contact with specifically reptilian beings, the little greys who work for the reptilians. They're an artificial race, by the way.
Created by the reptilians as slaves, or?
Correct, right, correct. And that's what they do. Whenever they get to a planet, that they're occupying. They take the genetics of the local race, and they create these robot creatures from that.
But why do you think in our films, in movies, that we always see the little greys shown and depicted and not really reptilians?
Couple of reasons. Number one, the little greys are the ones that people remember from their abductions, because these are the ones that actually take the person and bring them to the location for experimentation and so on. So that is in the psyche of the species mind pattern of humanity. That's one reason. The other reason is they're not going to tell you who's pulling the strings. They're not going to show you that one, because the more they tell you, the more power you have. See? So they only show you this much of what's going on out there. But the greys, there was a point where the reptilians decided they were no longer necessary. Whatever needed to be done, they didn't need the greys to do it anymore. And so the greys were being cast out. And so the greys developed their own agenda, which they called the change. And they started their own hybridization process, where they would mix their genetics with human beings over generations, until finally, by the late 90s, they had what they called a late stage hybrid. Late stage hybrid looks like human being, but with alien mind. And slowly, they put them in various places on the earth to create semblance of being part of humanity. And then slowly the idea is to replace humans with them, and they will have the planet. And that's why they show these abductees, they show them images on a screen of happy families, and everyone's having a picnic, and the world is so lovely and beautiful. And they say, this is what the world will become. And they say, if you don't do this, here's the alternative. And then they show destruction and earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and this kind of thing. So the abductee wants, of course, the nice picture, and goes along with what the little greys tell them to do.
Well, that's just turning on the evening news, right? More or less.
Unfortunately, and the news, you can't trust either, what it says. And I travel quite a bit, and the news in different countries is very different. What in the United States is different than in Russia, is different than in China, different than in Europe, all different news about the same story. So very interesting.
So please talk about the hierarchy between these ET races. Who are the supporters of humanity, and who are the controllers? Who are the benevolent ones, and who are the malevolent ones?
My opinion, 99% are malevolent. Nobody is here to help humanity. And all of the New Age people that say their DNA is being upgraded and the aliens are helping them, this is a lie. This is a deception. This is, while you're looking over here, they're doing something over here. It's not true. Most beings that come here have an agenda, and the agenda is for their own good, not for humanity. And I know a lot of people get upset with that, but that's the truth. And think about it. These aliens have been here for so long. If they had an agenda to help humanity, why would the Earth be the way it is now after all these years? It's worse. And that's their agenda, to make it worse so they can control it.
You've spoken about different types of reptilians as well. Do you think there are any good reptilians?
As in all groups, there's good and bad. But the benevolent being, and there are benevolent beings, but they don't interfere, because they know that every species must find its own way. And, if you keep giving a child lunch and feeding him, he'll never learn how to make his own lunch.
But if there are some benevolent ones, why can't they help the Earth?
So that's just now starting. But let me clarify. It's not because they love human beings. It's because they know they are in danger if the deep state wins. Because the agenda of the deep state is to, first of all, make this planet into a communist, socialist dictatorship with robot slaves, human beings, and then to take this Earth as a headquarters and fan that out into the universe and control other worlds. So the ones who are concerned about this are trying to stop them, and in so doing are helping certain governments to do so. But again, it's not because they love humans, it's because they are helping to defend their own people against what might happen here.
Some species come from the Draco system, right? And some come from the Pleiades or the Lyra system. Am I correct?
Lyra system.
Lyra, what? Yeah, okay.
Mostly was destroyed. Pleiades, most of that is a New Age mind control story. Yeah, all the lovely Pleiadians, they're going to come and give you this kind of technology and all kinds of lovely things. It's a New Age story.
So they're not the Nordics?
The Nordics are different. They are different. And quite honestly, there are many different Nordics. The Nordic prototype is the norm for mammalian species in this galaxy. So when you say Nordic, it's like saying European. Is it a Danish or Icelandic or French? Which European? So in which Nordic are you talking about? There are many, many. You understand? And I realize that the things that I say disturb many people and they don't want to hear this or believe it. But if you want to know the truth, this is the truth.
Bring it on.
People thought they would vote what their vote counts. It doesn't. It's a lie. So I'm telling you more that's not true that you need to know about, so hopefully things can change in the future.
Some people say that the Draco race, Draconians, that they're actually good. Some researchers have said that even. What are your opinion?
And those researchers are either very mind-controlled or very troubled people.
So they're not good?
No. They have not any good intention here.
Have you seen any of these reptilians or any Nordics or anything like that when you were at Montauk or anywhere else?
Yes, I have written about it. And the reptilians were the ones who taught the humans how to perform the sexual magic ritual. They're the ones who asked for the hybridization programs to begin. They're the ones who also asked for females to be used as breeders so that they could use the offspring as a food source. Yes, that's what the reptilians did.
But have you experienced that? Have they been in front of you doing sexual ritual magic on you?
Yes, I have written about this. I have talked about this for decades.
People who have not read your books yet, maybe you can share a bit of that information, because it's very, very extraordinary and mind-blowing. And please let's shed some light on that.
The reptilian mindset is, first of all, these particular ones that you mentioned from Draco star system, they are androgynous, meaning male and female in the same body. However, the genetic or the gender predominance is they lean more towards masculine than feminine, even though they're androgynous. And interestingly enough, they have a queen, not a king. They have a queen, and she is the only female, pure female, who is used to seed the race, if you will. Now, these androgynous beings feed off of the energy of fear, anxiety, and so on. So they like to create ritual or even events that create this type of emotion. And then the emotion in the pineal gland creates a chemical called adrenochrome. Adrenochrome is like their cocaine, if you will. And at the moment of heightened fear, just before death, it is extracted from the pineal gland, and they use this as a drug.
Extracted physically, or let's say, energetically?
Both, but it is physical. It's a liquid in a little vial that they use, and they ingest this, and that creates like a frenzy, like a feeding frenzy, and that's when they start to rip apart the bodies, drink the blood, and so on. Now, they worship astral entities as their gods. And so they also have a person called a vessel. The vessel is the person who goes into a trance because of the ritual, and the astral entity enters the body of the vessel, and the participants in the ritual then have sexual interaction with the vessel because they are getting the energy of that entity. Once the ritual is completed, then they kill the vessel and they drink the blood, the body parts, and so on, because then it incorporates into the body of the participants. So they're getting the astral energy physically induced that they can take in and use for themselves.
So is the vessel human? Is that a woman,
yes,
or a boy, or a man, or
it can be either. It can be either one.
But why are we hearing that they're sacrificing children especially, which is horrifying?
Because children have a more pure energy. You know, they haven't been contaminated with the toxins on the earth and in the food and so on. So that's a much pure energy. That's one. Second of all, their fear emotion is much more intense because they cannot rationalize anything like an adult or so on. And so their fear energy is greater, and it's a greater power for the ones who ingest this.
But if you took part in this and you were exposed to it and actually forced to endure these things, why are you still alive? Why didn't they kill you and make you one of the sacrifices?
Yes, it's always interesting to me that people are disappointed that I'm still living. But quite honestly, I've asked the same question. You know, I say, why am I alive? Because quite honestly, there are days I wish I wasn't.
Really?
It's, you know...
Then you wouldn't live to tell your story.
Look, nobody even cares so much anymore. And it's a painful memory to have for the rest of your life. You understand?
Oh, boy.
Especially now, the only one who really could understand that was Duncan, and he's gone. And so the thing is, my genetics, for some reason, were unique in the sense that when they would do programming on me, it's supposed to wipe your memory. Mine didn't. So this was an anomaly, and they wanted to study me further because how could I, first of all, survive? And second of all, how could I remember it? I'm not supposed to remember it.
Were you always able to remember this, or did you retrieve the memories after deprogramming years later?
I remembered, not in every detail, but I remembered what happened, and then my deprogramming sessions brought out more information. But I remembered everything that happened, and that's what made me an anomaly.
So the mind control programming didn't actually work on you properly?
I do have programming issues, of course, like everyone else. But the thing is, I recognize when the triggers occur, and I can work on them so that they don't stay in activation.
So can you still be triggered by something? Is this like what we've seen in the films, The Manchurian Candidate, that was one in 1962, and then a remake in 2005?
It's a lot more complicated than that, you know, but yes, of course I can be triggered. Absolutely, I can be triggered. And I find that what triggers me the most now is because of what I do, I must see the news. I need to know what's going on so I can analyze it. When I see stories of people hurting children, of people hurting animals, of such things, it really triggers a very strong anger effect in me, to the point where if the perpetrator were in front of me, they wouldn't be here anymore. Seriously. And so I have to learn on removing my own anger issues and so on, because that comes from the Montauk Project.
Mm-hmm. So you're suffering a lot from, let's say, anger management, or?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I could get very angry very easily, absolutely. And I have to watch what I say sometimes. You know, especially, you know, when I'm going through the airport, or they ask me a ridiculous question, and sometimes, like, okay, I start to tell them what I think about what they're doing, you know, and then I think, oh, you better shut up because it's not a good thing. But I have to learn to do that. It's my trigger.
They don't know any better, and they don't know the whole
some
situation.
Do, some don't. You know, it depends on the person. Most of them, correct. Most of them are mindless. They have no idea. You know, they just do their work and they don't think about it.
So please share with our viewers your extraordinary version, alternative and mind-blowing version of world history and the history of our universe, which of course ties in with Saturn and the moon, Atlantis and Lemuria.
Okay. The origin of human mammalian life in this galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, was in the star system you mentioned earlier, Lyra. It was very pure, very spiritually advanced, but because it was so spiritually advanced, they had no concept of defense, offense, weapons, this kind of thing. The other major star system, Draco star system, was populated by androgynous reptilian species who were very aggressive. Now, their mindset is and was that they are more superior to humans because they're androgynous. When you go outside of the physical body, there's no male and female. So they said God mind is androgynous, and so since they are androgynous, they are like God. That's one thing. Second thing is mammals have to constantly evolve in order to adapt to the environment. Whereas reptilians, as you see even on the Earth, for millions of years, they stay the same. They don't change. So to the reptilian mind, that means they're already perfect. They don't have to change. And humans are inferior, and they always have to change. Now, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just saying that this is how they think. So they had an agenda to fan out through the galaxy and then the universe to adapt inferior civilizations to their own, because to them, it was a spiritual act. They were upgrading from their perspective all the other inferior civilizations. And so when they came across this mammalian, human, I don't really like to say human because they weren't quite, they were beyond human civilization, they attacked them. And the Lyrians really had no defense against it.
Did they look human, the Lyrians?
They looked very much like the Nordics. They were tall, either blonde or red hair, blue or green eyes, very white skin. And they lived a long time, thousands of years. There was really, you died when you wanted to. There was no illness. You understand?
And they're often depicted as very beautiful, right?
Yes, it was what the Bible refers to as the Garden of Eden, or like a heaven. It was like that. But it was destroyed. And the survivors fanned out through the rest of the galaxy as far as they could. And some came to this particular solar system here. Now, the solar system then was a different configuration. The Earth was completely surrounded or covered by water, and it was in the second position from the sun. Mars was more Earth-like with oceans and atmospheres. After Mars was a larger planet that was called Maldek. Maldek also had atmosphere and oceans, etc. And so after a bit of time, the reptilians discovered these colonies from the Liran civilization, and they sent into the solar system a weapon that they use as an ice comet. It is ice comet, but it is pulled by a small artificially created black hole that is the propulsion system. As this ice comet entered into the solar system, it caused the planet Uranus to flip on its axis. Uranus is the only planet that rotates north to south instead of west to east like this. Then it came into a position between Saturn, Jupiter, Maldek, and so on. And the gravitational pull, or the geomagnetic pull of all these big objects close together caused Maldek to explode. And that's what created the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter.
That sounds very much like a scene from Star Wars where they blow up, the Death Star is blowing up the planet Alderaan.
Except it wasn't from a weapon, it was from the pull of the geomagnetic energies between them. It wasn't, in other words, Maldek wasn't blown up by a weapon, it exploded from the force of all of this together. Now, as this ice comet then passed Mars, it pulled much of the atmosphere and oceans off of Mars. And to this day, there's 3 kilometers of topsoil missing from the northern hemisphere of Mars. So that Mars is not completely round. The northern hemisphere is indented a bit. It was pulled off. I'm making a very long story short. And then the inhabitants of Mars went inside, because planets like Mars and the Earth are hollow. They're hollow, so you can go inside.
So you're certainly not a so-called flat earther, I can tell.
Oh, please, the only people who believe that, their heads are flat, not the Earth. So the Earth is round. Every planet is round. Yeah, and so as this ice comet then approached the Earth, it went into a spin gyration on the Earth, and the oceans polarized, and the ice caps formed, and land appeared on the surface. Then the ice comet moved past the Earth and pushed the Earth further out away from the sun, and the ice comet took up the second position and was captured by the gravitational pull of the sun at that point and went into orbit. And the light, not the heat, but the light of the sun caused the ice to evaporate and create a cloud cover around this object and became the planet Venus. And then the Earth became inhabitable because now there was land masses. So the reptilians drove another vehicle into our solar system and parked it around the Earth in order to colonize this planet. And we call that object the moon. The moon is artificial. It's not a natural object.
How can they drive that object in there?
The black hole I told you about that they manufacture and pulls. Now, NASA has already determined that the rocks on the moon are older than the Earth. And it's not from it has no composition that's anywhere connected to the solar system. And there's a lot of fake stories about the moon, but I'm going to tell you the moon is a fake object. And it is parked in orbit like a vehicle. It never spins. Its one side faces all the time. And it was manufactured specifically for the Earth, so that when the Earth and the moon is in between, and the sun, It completely fills the corona of the sun perfectly. That's part of the reptilian ritual. No other moon does that. And the Earth is too small to capture an object that large. The moon is almost the size of a small planet. And so it is artificially in orbit. It is mechanically being held in orbit at a specific distance from the Earth so that it fills the corona of the sun when necessary.
But it's still a rocky surface, right? And real rocks. So that's not artificial, huh?
It was, let's say, camouflaged. Let's say camouflaged. But originally, it's believed it was an asteroid that was hollowed out because the surface of the moon is filled with debris that came from inside. And the surface of the moon is covered with an element called helio-3, which is not natural and cannot be manufactured on the Earth, but only in space. And the moon is covered in it. You will also notice the so-called craters on the moon. Now, theoretically, if they say these craters were created by bombardment of objects that hit the moon, yes, where is the debris and where is the crater? Because when you go in, it's flat. It's just a ridge around them that looks like a crater, but it's flat. There's no impact zone. So how could that have been so?
So do you think that we have seen real images and footage from the moon, even in 1969?
If you're talking about the landings, no. I will tell you that the US and Soviet spacecraft have been there since the late 50s, not 69. That was for show. That was what we call a global ritual. That's why it happened in the year 1969, which is a sexual imagery, because it represents the symbolic union of heaven and earth for the Illuminati. There are 3 rituals that need to be performed before their Antichrist comes. The first one was the simultaneous creation and destruction of matter, which was the nuclear bomb. Then was the symbolic union of heaven and earth. Third will be the temple in Jerusalem, third temple. And so then the Antichrist that they will create will come. Understand? And so it's all part of a plan.
Some people suggest that the moon landing in 1969 were filmed and directed by Stanley Kubrick. What are your thoughts on that?
No, yes, that's what you saw on the television was a film, yeah, was a movie.
By him?
There were many involved, not just him. There were many involved, but it was done in a studio. In fact, my information is that some of the scenes were filmed outside of Las Vegas in a moon-like environment. Anyway, but that doesn't mean that we didn't go to the moon. It just means that image was not from the moon. You understand? Humans have been on the moon. In fact, there are bases on the moon and inside the moon, especially. And in fact, the Germans were connected to a group from the Aldebaran star system. These beings say that they were responsible for the creation of the Teutonic race on the Earth, and that they gave them technology, and this is actually documented by the Third Reich in their information. Those who can read and understand German, there is a book called Flugscheiben über Schwabenland, and this book documents in the 1920s and 30s and 40s how the Germans received this technology from this group and created vehicles that they tested in Prague airport in 1937 that went 5,000 kilometers per hour then.
Really?
Yes, yes. And it was from this technology that from 1938 to 1944, the Germans created in Antarctica what they call the paradise for the Fuhrer. And that is why you have film. You can see film in 1944, early 45, before the end of the war, of very Aryan-like people with their suitcases marching to the ships in Bremerhaven, and they left Germany never to return.
But that must be a very, very ice-cold paradise if it's in Antarctica.
No, because it's underneath, and the German submarines, the Unterseeschiff, they discovered tunnels under the ice that led into areas that were very temperate under the ice, and huge caverns that they were able to develop and create all kinds of civilizations down there. Well, German, New Berlin, New München, New Frankfurt, all is there. 1946 and 47, you may recall, the Americans and the British and some Canadians in Project Highjump sent a huge fleet to Antarctica. The war was over. What were they going for? And they were attacked by high technology. 55 US servicemen were killed. And after a few months, they withdrew and they went back to the Northern Hemisphere.
Was that the story of Admiral Byrd, who accidentally flew into a hole in the ground in Antarctica?
That came after.
Uh-huh.
He came and he didn't accidentally. They knew where they were going. And they went in, and the very powerful Germans said, "Get out. We will come back to the surface when the time comes. But we're watching you, and you're not welcome here." Now, 2010, I went to Antarctica, and I went to a British military base. I went to many bases, Ukrainian, British, Argentinian, Chilean. I went many places. And on the British base, there is a plaque that says that the base was built to observe the enemy. So I said, what enemy? Maybe there are terrorist penguins or terrorist walrus there. What is going on? Nobody will answer this question.
How on earth, to coin a phrase, were you allowed to go to Antarctica?
You can go too.
How? I didn't think it was possible or allowed.
You fly to Ushuaia, Argentina, and from Ushuaia you could take a ship to Antarctica. Yes, you can do.
You can do that physically. I didn't think that it was open for the public to go there.
Now they have restricted it. This was 9 years ago, but now you can. I think you can still go, but maybe not as easily.
Did you take pictures or film anything when you were there?
Of course. And in fact, at one point we sailed into Deception volcano, which was a very stupid idea. It's a live volcano, but it's just sticking up above the ocean, and there's a little cutout in the side of the volcano. You can go right into the center of the volcano and sail around the middle of it. And at that moment, in broad daylight, 2 UFOs flew over us.
Really? Did you see that?
Yes, of course.
Did you film any of that? Was
yes,
that possible?
Yes, I took.
Have you publicized these photographs?
I did back then.
Uh-huh.
I did then. Yes, and so yes, these things happen in broad daylight. And anyway, I always go where people not supposed to go. Same thing. I was in Svalbard in the North Pole. I think that was in 2013. And there again, huge complex of antenna. And they said, don't stand underneath it because it's very dangerous.
Svalbard is like a Norwegian island, isn't it? Close to the North Pole.
It's administrated by Norway, but it is not actually part of Norway. In fact, when you fly from Oslo to Svalbard, you have to go through migration. So it's not part of Norway, really.
Uh-huh.
And there are several nations that have an agreement about Svalbard. And if you live in one of those nations with the agreement, you can go live there. No questions asked. However, if you do any kind of crime, you will be banned from Svalbard for the rest of your life. And everyone must carry a gun because there are more polar bears than people And just the week before I arrived, a girl was eaten by a polar bear.
Wow, oh my God.
Yeah.
So what you saw in Iron Sky, that movie, which was almost cartoonish a few years ago, about the Nazis having built bases on the moon, you're actually saying that that is the truth?
Yes, it is true.
So how about the Illuminati, or let's say the high top elite New World Order factions of the military and government? Do they have bases on the moon as well?
Some. The Americans and the Russians have base on the surface of the moon, but inside is the alien bases. When the first landing on the moon and the public one, 1969, you know, the transmission of the astronauts was censored. It was censored. And there was a delay on purpose. And they said that on the ridge above them were the alien ships and they were being watched. They said this, you see. I will tell you that there are many alien bases, not only in other planets and moons of this solar system, but also on this planet, particularly in the Andes Mountains, Himalayan mountains, and under the oceans. And even in Iceland, I used to work in Iceland. There is the Snæfellsjökull Peninsula, which is north of Reykjavik. Now, one of my friends used to live there, and she said that the people would leave food out at night for these beings that lived in the glacier, because they didn't want them to disturb them, so they would leave food out for them at night. That was just one of the local customs.
What types of beings were they, or are they?
They are basically like the little greys that you have heard about. Every year, by the way, people disappear in this glacier, Snæfellsjökull, and never find a trace of them, ever. But I will tell you, the British and the Americans know that this particular area has the largest UFO base in North Atlantic, is located there in Iceland. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Now it's interesting that across from there in Greenland, the Americans in the last few years have put a very secret base. No one even knows about it. But Iceland people know, because the Americans come there for weekend on the break, and they say, we're from Greenland, they can't tell you what we're doing. So they're obviously monitoring this alien base in Iceland.
Is that the American Thule base on Greenland?
No, Thule base,
yes,
is on the other side of Greenland.
Uh-huh.
Well, Denmark owns Greenland.
Yes.
So you should know more about that.
I'm aware.
Thule is west.
Yes. So the reptilians and the Lyrians came to Earth. You were talking about the story with Maldek exploding and Venus, which was the ice comet, and then the Earth was inhabitable. Who came here first, and how did life on Earth begin?
The reptilians, of course, came first on the moon. They colonized the largest continent, which we know as Lemuria. And it wasn't until many thousands of years later, tens of thousands of years later, that the refugees from Lyra came to the second largest continent, which we know as Atlantis. So here we have two different species that don't belong in the same environment, all looking for power. And there was a lot of war between the two groups. And so after a while, in order to create a peace treaty, they decided to create a third species, which was a synthesis between the reptilian and the Lyrian. And that's why it says in Genesis, let us make man in our image. It's plural. It's not a singular God saying, I'm going to make man look like me. It says, let us, who's us? Make man in our. All of the references to God in the Old Testament are plural. They are plural, not singular. And so they created an idea to create donation of DNA between the two species to make a new one. Now, of course, each side programmed their genetics to be dominant over the other one. So already it was sabotage. And so the idea was to take an androgynous reptilian body as a template and add the mammalian genetics to that. And that was the new species. And the proof you can see in any gestation on Earth, any woman who's pregnant, you look at the fetus for the first 6-7 weeks, it's an androgynous reptilian being in there, because the genetics are following the order in which they were placed. And only after 6 or 7 weeks, then mammalian genetics open up and it starts to look more human. You understand?
So we are a hybrid, you say,
Yes.
of the reptilian
Yes.
and the Lyrian mammalians.
Yes.
And is that why we have the reptilian brain?
Yes. Yes, you have reptilian brainstem, you have skin that wrinkles and peels, you have a 4-chamber heart with 3 arteries coming out like reptilian, lymphatic system is reptilian, and so on. Yes, you split brain, yes, because you are hybrid. Human beings on this planet are an artificial race, not natural. And that is also why there is such interest from other places in this planet, because it's very strange here.
But how about our souls? I mean, most people today even believe, of course, that we have a soul, especially if you have a connection to, let's just say, the universe and even just yourself as a human being. So please talk about the soul, because what is that in connection with us being a hybrid?
I call soul personality. To me, there's only one soul, and that's a God mind. From that God mind emanates many aspects, and everything that you can think of is possible. So even if there is hybridization between species, there will be the dominant energy field that is able to animate that particular body. So for example, the higher level being will be able to animate the spirit, the physical body, so that it can live. I give you an example. If you cross, for example, a mouse with a chimpanzee, and you have a hybrid, the soul personality in that hybrid must be chimpanzee, because the mouse personality cannot animate the chimpanzee genetics. Only the higher one can do the lower one. Do you understand? So here again, it depends on the level of mentality of the soul personality of which takes control of this body. You understand? That's why we have reptilian souls and mammalian souls on this planet. Depends on the genetics of that body, depends on the level of understanding of that soul personality.
But where do the souls come from? I mean, we are getting more and more people on the planet over the years, and certainly since the times that you're describing. So where do the souls come from?
God creates all. God mind creates all existence.
And who and what is God in your opinion? Is that like the Christian type God, or is it, you say, God mind? What is that? The source? Is that a force?
God mind has no religion. There's no Christian, Jewish, Muslim. It's not. It's just is. It's, imagine something. Imagine that you are a omnipotent being that always existed and always will exist, and you are the only thing that exists. We'd be very lonely. So when you start thinking, what am I? What am I doing? You start to generate thought patterns that replicate yourself, and then start to make images of yourself mentally. And these mental images become the soul personalities, sometimes oversoul, which then generates soul personality. In my classes, I can spend days on explaining this. So it's difficult or challenging to say a sentence on a soul is this or God is this. It's very, very intense.
So can we call the soul an interdimensional being in itself? Is that almost like what we also hear about, let's just say, the darker aspects of these interdimensional beings, such as archons, what the Gnostic described, or the Muslims call them the jinns, and I guess Christians would call them demons?
Yes, and yet all of those come from the God mind.
They come from the God mind as well.
There's only one God. It created all things. And so whether you think it's good or evil, it comes from the same place.
But why would such a God or God mind, which is supposed to be good, create something that is so evil and feeding off human beings' spirit and energy and frequencies and everything?
Yes. And the answer is that God mind has a dual nature. So that whatever is created as two, a positive and negative, male, female, left, right, and so on and so on. That doesn't mean one is better than the other. It's a matter of perspective. You know, the so-called evil side, they think they are the right ones. And the good ones think they are the right ones. You understand? And yet, if they would go deeper, they have one connection. It's all one. But it has two sides. So I could take a pen and write beautiful poetry with it, or I could stab you with it. It's the same pen. It's simply what I do with it.
If you write something beautiful, it's good. If you stab somebody, or if it's war and destruction, and you talk about all these horrific satanic rituals and aliens feeding on human being souls, I mean, how can that? Why is that so?
It has to do with the mind pattern of the one who experiences it. So, and I'm going to say something that's very controversial. So, for example, if a woman is attacked, is she the good one and the rapist is the bad one? Or did her mind pattern attract that experience and the rapist agreed to do this incident? Why is a child born in poverty and starving and another one is born in the Buckingham Palace? Why? Because it's the mind pattern. What are you attracting? What are you thinking that attracts the experience?
But nobody would attract something that horrific, at
Yes,
least
they
not
would.
by their own volition, huh?
If it happens, then they will do it. You know, why does somebody take drugs and hurt themselves when they could take a vitamin instead? Because they have a mind pattern of self-destruction. That's why. So you can't judge why would a person do this, why. It's because that's what they're thinking.
Are you talking about the law of attraction, that you attract good and you also attract the bad if there's something you don't want?
No, not attract. You create it. Your mind is like a film. The brain is the projector. Physical reality is the screen. So when you are thinking of playing a movie of your life, that's what will happen in front of you. You don't like that? Change the movie. Change the way you think, and all around you will change.
Is this universe we're living in right now, in fact, an artificial universe within a matrix or a grid around the Earth, and is not so-called real, whatever a real is, but actually a fake simulation?
No. I know the people that say such things. These are people who don't take responsibility for their own actions. These are people who won't take responsibility for the way they think. And so they blame some alien group for making an artificial creation. No.
So it's real.
Yes, it's very real. And it can be changed just by the way you think. And I would encourage everybody listening to prove it to themselves by changing and eliminating their negative mind patterns and replacing it with positive, that you control your own self to prove that you are in charge of your creation, of your own reality. Nobody else is. You have been given every power that exists in the God mind, and you need to use it properly. When you don't use it properly and you start thinking negatively, you will create these negative experiences.
But a lot of researchers, I do believe you've spoken about this as well, is that say that we are living in a holographic universe, that everything is in fact a sophisticated hologram.
It's a hologram, but it's real. We are creating it, and we can change it. All of physical reality, anywhere, this universe, alternate universe, anything physical is a holographic projection from the spiritual side. And so if we correct that, we don't have to experience all of this.
What significance does the planet Saturn play in all of this?
I know what some people have said, and it's not correct.
Have you read the book by Norman Bergeron called The Ringmakers of Saturn?
Yes. I'm sorry. I don't comment on work of others, but I know this is not correct. I will tell you that the deep state, Illuminati, whatever their term is these days, they are trying to create Saturn to be a second sun in our solar system so they can recreate the environment on the Draco star system. That is what they're doing. But there's nothing, what you mentioned is not correct.
So the beams, the rings around Saturn is not projecting, let's just say, this hologram that we have within the matrix.
No. The rings came from the explosion of MONTAUK, and they are made up of ice particle and debris from that planet that was captured by the gigantic geomagnetic pull of Saturn. In fact, even Uranus has rings. And a lot of other planets have rings which have captured debris from what happened.
Who told you your version of this story? Because it's always very interesting when speaking to different researchers and people who've been in the same field that you are in and have been lecturing for so many years.
If we change our mind pattern and develop unconditional love, there's no reason to fight anybody. Then the deep state would not exist because they're feeding off the negative mind pattern. If you don't have it, they have no power. There's no one to fight. The fight's in here. That's where the fight is. You understand?
But how come you have your version and then other researchers in the same field have a different version? What is the truth, which is what we would love to uncover here and I guess everywhere in the truth movement?
The truth is that all is one. What you do with that is your own reality. Yes, you take 100 researchers, there's going to be 110 answers. You understand? And I don't care what other people say. I only know what I know. And I know this from my many years, unfortunately, of being in the Montauk Project, where this was analyzed intensely and information given and verified. Plus, I have traveled to just about every country on this planet and every continent on this planet to find information that you're not going to get on the internet, you're not going to find it in a book, and nobody's going to tell it to you. You have to go and you have to do the research and find out for yourself. And because I learned the language of hyperspace and I learned how to see energy fields and read such things, I can see what is the truth and what is not the truth.
Is that some kind of download that you get that is projected into your mind?
No. This is New Age la-la stuff. No download. You make it. You see it. You open up your own mind pattern, open up your own DNA, and then you have all the power. No one has to download you with anything. See, that is taking away your power. You have to be upgraded. You have to be downloaded. Someone has to give you. No, it's all inside you already.
So could some of the information that you have, could that be like implanted when you were under these mind control experiments in order for them to want you to talk about this alternative?
Well, that would be an explanation for people who don't want to believe what I'm saying and want to accuse me of such things.
But whether or not they accuse you, it is interesting to ask the question to you and to everybody else who has a very alternative story about the world than we are told.
If you do your deprogramming techniques and your release work, then it's not possible to have any implants that give you information like that.
There was something called false memory syndrome that we heard about many years ago also. Do you think that, have you been in contact with that, or do you think you could have been influenced by that?
No. I mentioned to you that I never lost my memory. I knew single thing that happened to me, and I have confirmed it medically and psychologically and in every other way. So people can make up whatever they want to say I'm not true. That's their stuff. But ultimately, they will find out differently.
So is planet Earth under some kind of quarantine?
Well, that's curiosity. I talked about for many years the Kuiper Belt, which is a region which is outside of it's like the border of our solar system. And yes, there is a fleet of craft there from other places, not necessarily from this universe, that are quarantining this solar system. Because as I mentioned, this is a dangerous place. The Earth is considered a hostile, dangerous place that needs to be contained. Yes, that is happening.
But how do we break free from this state of imprisonment? I mean, how do we break free from this grid or this quarantine? And even that may maybe also lead to the next question of what happens when we die and our souls leave the body. People talk about this white light frequency that religions call heaven, and you see relatives, dead relatives looking their best, and tunnel of light, life review, and then going into this reincarnation, recycling factory and go back to another body on Earth with a wiped memory. What are your thoughts on that?
Reincarnation is an illusion, because you have to understand there is no past, present, or future. There is only the simultaneous now. So you can't go into another body. You can't, because it's all happening now. You are simultaneously existing at once in all of these incarnations, if you will.
In many bodies at the same time.
Yes. Yes, that's part of your infinite self. You're part of the infinite. And so you can be any place at any time, simply where it matters where you're focusing at the moment. And so that's why when we look into the past, we focus on that particular spot and we see it. Because it's happening now. It's simply like, think of a radio, all the different dials. And I turn the dial a little bit, it's a different one. A little bit, a different station, different, all different. Yes, the same radio. So you're like radio, and you have all these different stations, and you can tune in at the same moment, all of them. There's no past, present, or future. It's all same time.
So what you're saying is that reincarnation is real in that say. It's an illusion, but we live in these many different bodies and on different timelines, maybe in Egypt or in ancient Greece or wherever right now at this particular point. But how can we break free of this cycle if we are on a so-called prison planet where we have to be exposed to all of these horrific things, and even just the monetary system which keeps people in organized slavery?
This is what my work is about. Deprogramming, release work, growing up the child within, oversoul work, connecting to the God mind. All of these things will remove what you call imprisonment, the victimization mind pattern that people have that allows these things to take place. So when you remove this, then you can be free. And you could live in the middle of China and not be affected by the rules and regulations when you have a free mind pattern, when you've released all of these things. So it doesn't matter where you are, who you are. It only matters what you are doing with your own mind. And if you are releasing the constraints that you have actually allowed to be placed on yourself. Can't blame anybody. Only we must take responsibility.
But can we choose when we leave the body, when the soul leave the body, when we die? Can we choose to go to source? You call it God mind. Can we choose to go through, some people call it the cheese holes, through the grid, to go to another dimension, another universe, or anything else away from planet Earth?
Yes, you can do that, as long as you have no need for more lessons here.
Do we know that, or are we so attracted to the light when we see it when leaving the body? This is what a lot of near-death experiencers have spoken about.
Yes, that's true. Yes, because you go into the non-physical, you're actually experiencing your oversoul, which is the liaison to the God mind. And it's kind of like when you go to school and you come home and they say, well, what did you learn today? Did you learn this? Do you think you need to study that more? Or do you think you're finished? You want to go to another school? It's like that. There's no standard answer. It's what you need. What you need, that's important for you.
So you can choose.
You can choose with the existence of your oversoul and the God mind within you. Because quite frankly, most people on this planet, they can't tie their own shoelaces, let alone choose what lifetime they should have. You know, unfortunately, I'm sorry, but humans are not that smart. That's why they're in this situation. So yes, we need assistance from higher aspects of self connected to the God mind that say, well, I will suggest that you study this and this, and that will help you from now on.
But if you're meeting these guides, do you think that they could actually be illusionary figures, really maybe disguised, archons in disguise that some people talk about?
If you were a drug addict, an alcoholic, a person that did many bad things, yes, you can be deceived by the astral, and yes, absolutely. But if you did the best you could, and you had spiritual side, and you try to do higher things, then that will not happen to you.
Mm-hmm. So what is the difference between a wormhole and a vortex?
Okay, so a wormhole is a shortcut between point A and point B in the same reality. A vortex is a shortcut between point A and point B in different realities. For example, there is a wormhole from Australia to the Mars underground. Wormhole. There are a vortex, let's say Bermuda Triangle, Devil's Triangle, to other realities, not in this universe. That's the difference.
So what is then the difference between an artificial wormhole and a real wormhole? Because you've mentioned that they at Montauk could create these artificial wormholes in order to travel from point A to point B.
Right. So in creation, there are sections that are wormholes and vortices naturally. But there is technology, like I mentioned, the artificial black hole that they pull the moon and so on, that can be created. The effect is the same. It's simply one is natural, one is artificial. But I will tell you something about simultaneous existence. Black holes in one universe is either a vortex or a wormhole to a star that is the exit point. So stars and black holes are the opposites of each other. One is an entry, one is an exit. And that's how the various universes balance energy between them. It's kind of like the universe is breathing with the black holes and the stars. And you may remember a few years ago when NASA had a sun cam, and they showed these huge vehicles exiting the sun. And people said, how could an object come out of the sun? Because it's an exit point of a wormhole or a vortex. Our star, our sun, is an exit point.
But they also claim that there are, let's say, crafts or vehicles within the rings of Saturn. Couldn't that be like the same kind of thing that you're talking about coming from the sun?
I'm sure there could be vehicles in there, but they're hiding perhaps in the rings, but they're not making them. The rings have been there for eons of time.
So, what is the true agenda of what is happening right now at this point behind 5G and the reason of implementing 5G, the radiation, and also smart meters and all of these things? Is it true that it's supposed to connect with artificial intelligence? And if you talk about 5G, please also talk about artificial intelligence and the agenda behind that and why.
That is correct about 5G. That is true, that it is being thrust upon the planet in order to enhance mind control and programming and alter genetic codes, just like HARP does. It's kind of connecting to that. So that's true. However, in the United States, there is an effort by a certain group to alter the technology of 5G and 6G so that it is not damaging. That's being done now.
That sounds promising, though.
Yes. That's in the process. And that I know that it will happen. And when it does, then it will be presented to other countries.
To benefit us, or what?
Yes. The negativity will, the negative aspects will be changed, removed, so that it will be for speed of transmission rather than alteration of mind pattern and genetics.
But that would not be part of the agenda of, let's say, the New World Order elite, would it?
Right, exactly, because that's the New World Order is not doing that. The ones who are trying to get rid of the deep state are doing that.
What is the agenda behind artificial intelligence and that we should connect with all of this, say, Internet of Things?
Mm-hmm. I would say if you watch the Star Trek movies with the Borg, and everyone is connected to a computer and has their instructions and so on, that's the idea of it, to make a robot cyborg community that does not question anything, just follows orders. And that's why, Lucas, there's an agenda to change gender identity, national identity, so that ultimately you don't know what you are. You don't know who you are, so they will tell you who you are.
What is the gender agenda? What is that actually? There's a lot going on at the moment about that.
Remember I mentioned that the reptilians are androgynous. They don't have a gender. So neither should the people they control, you see? So that's why they're telling 3-year-old children that they can change their gender. I mean, a 3-year-old doesn't know what day of the week it is, let alone what their gender is, you know? And that's why they have all these immigrants being thrust into Europe and the United States, so that ultimately there is no more Denmark, there is no more Sweden, there is already no more Sweden, and so on. And, you know, my family, and I have many family in Sweden, and my family, you know, my name Swerdlow is a Swedish name.
Really?
They say it's Russian, but it's really from Sweden. Sverd, sword, luf, leaf. Swerdlow. It's the same in Danish, if you speak Danish.
Yes, I do.
You know, it's funny because I did a seminar in Norway, and somebody came from Denmark, and they were speaking, and I said, oh, to the Norwegian, I said, do you understand Danish? And they said, Danish is not a language, it's a throat disease.
Well, it does sound like that a little bit, doesn't it?
So for me, the reason I say this is to remove these identities. There is no more Sweden, no more Denmark, no more Germany. There's something else.
They seem to certainly have been experimenting on, well, not only implementing the gender agenda, but also microchipping in Sweden specifically, which is very alarming to a lot of people, also in Denmark. And they're trying to kind of do the same sort of thing here.
Yes, you know, Sweden has the University of Uppsala, you know, Uppsala University. This was actually mind control center, very much like Tavistock, very much like Montauk Project. It was a European version. And that's why they use Sweden as a test for what they will do to the rest of Europe. Because it was a small population, you know, and so it was very easy to do this. It's also happening in Finland. You know, Finland was stuck between Soviet Union and the Western world. And I know that from St. Petersburg during that time, they would bombard Finland with mind control waves, and Sweden would bombard with different mind control waves. And so Finland was a test to see what would happen when these things clashed. They tested this on Finland. And now Finland has problems because, you know, Russia considers Finland to be a province, not separate country. And so did you know that Finland allows Russians to settle there? And when I worked in Helsinki, and I hear only Russian. So I said, why is so many Russians in Finland? Only 4 million people. They said, oh, well, we let them settle here. I said, can you go to Russia? No. So it's brilliant. Let the Russians in, only 4 million people in Finland. Soon, Russians become majority, no more Finland. You understand? That's what's happening with the rest of Europe, only with other people. It was an experiment, and that's working.
Did you know the late, great former chief medical officer for Finland, Dr. Rauni Kilde?
Yes, and I know what happened.
Do you know what happened? Please elaborate on that.
Well, it was murdered, you know.
Do you think so?
Yes. I know other people who are very close to the situation, and I know that this was an intended specific target, death.
That was what she claimed also years up to her death, but other people also say that, well, she was 75.
That's young now, especially for Nordic country.
And she looked very healthy and was very vibrant. And
yes.
Electromagnetic weapons, or what? How do we explain that technique if that is true and that actually exists? That's what you're talking about, isn't it?
Every illness has a frequency. The frequency can be transmitted to the body, and the body doesn't know if it's an actual disease or not. So it accepts it as a disease and reacts accordingly. And that's how they can kill anybody, by transmitting the frequency of an illness.
Then let's get back to something a bit more mysterious, probably. Please talk about the Philadelphia experiment, because I know that you were friends with Al Bielek, who's also deceased now, and he's been speaking out for many years about his experiences on the SS Eldridge, the ship, where he supposedly time traveled to a distant future and also to 1983 at Montauk. And this took place in 1943. I suppose also your late friend who just died, Duncan Cameron, were part of this. Was it real? Was this Philadelphia experiment real? And did Al Bielek actually travel to the future?
The answer to both is yes. It was real. The Philadelphia project was real. Montauk was real. Al did travel to the future, but I want to tell you something. Because when you are in a specific point of time and space, and then you project yourself into a so-called future, because there is simultaneous existence and because there are infinite alternate realities, you don't know which future you are in. There could be one that's not related to your timeline. It could be an alternate, because the future linearly of where you are at this point depends on many decisions that are made. So based on what you see, it depends on what decisions were made. and which timeline you're focusing in.
So it could happen in a parallel universe and not in this one.
Correct.
Do you think that is what happened to Al Bielek? What was his opinion about what took place?
I had many discussions about that with him. And he also admitted that it was a possible future, that it didn't have to be like that. It was just one of the possibilities. And that's how we should always look at the future, as a possibility, because it linearly has not happened yet. And we can alter what we create based on what we perceive.
What is your opinion on the recent fire of the Notre Dame in Paris? Of course, there's a lot of speculation that this fire was actually done on purpose. What are your thoughts on that?
It was on purpose. You know, there are 72 vortices on this planet, natural and unnatural, that the Illuminati wished to open in order to allow astral entities to come through for their purpose. Notre Dame is one of those places. I remember when I was there a few years ago, I was physically attacked by an unseen entity behind me. So I know that it's a very astral location. And so it was purposely blocked by this fire, which is purging, in order to stop the ritual from occurring. Isn't it interesting that Michelle Obama just happened to be there at the time?
What is the significance of Michelle Obama being there?
This is a very big topic, and I really don't want to get into that aspect, but she was there to help open the vortex. In retribution, in punishment, they attacked the Christian locations in Sri Lanka afterwards. That was the deep state answer to the Notre Dame fire.
Also on purpose.
Yes.
But what you're saying about opening some kind of vortex for these entities to come through, that seems to be quite similar to what people say is happening at CERN in Switzerland, at the Hadron Collider.
CERN is, okay, we have many alternate realities. Realities where Atlantis never fell apart. Realities where the Nazis won the war. Realities where so and so happened. So CERN is designed to collapse those realities into this one, to empower them. That's what's going on there. But you will notice that they're always sabotaged. Every time they get to a certain point, they have to cut it off. The last time, a ridiculous explanation that was it a squirrel or some creature ate the power line outside. Did you see that story a couple of years? I'm like, billions of dollars and your electric line is outside for something to chew on? A cover story. It was a sabotage by the ones who are helping.
So they did not manage to open that vortex in order for supposedly these demons to come through to this reality.
No, not there. Not there.
But why is there a dancing Shiva outside of CERN, do you think? What is the significance of that symbolism?
A deity of destruction, isn't it? Yes, to destroy the civilization on this planet, to create something else.
But why would they want to destroy the civilization on the planet? They build it up.
They want to destroy independence and freedom and spirituality and replace it with dictatorship, mind control, and no deviation from their plan. So in order to do that, you must destroy what's here. You understand? Vatican is doing the same. The Vatican is part of that plan. In my work, I have had clients who worked in CERN. One was a nurse. She said there are tunnels underneath CERN that go under the lake, that go into France, into Italy, and so on. She's not allowed to go in there. Sometimes they will be presented with a soldier with an injury, a damage to the body that she's never seen before. And when they ask what happened, they cannot tell her. The Vatican has an office in CERN underground. Why? Why does the Vatican have an observatory in Arizona named Lucifer? Can you explain that one? That's one thing.
Why do they have that, Stewart?
I had someone who worked in the Vatican. This person was a spokesperson for the Pope in conferences, news. She was taught, they told her, when you speak to the public, you project red out, red. And if you know my hyperspace color therapy, red is anger, hurt, frustration. She says, why? Just so they be afraid of you, and they listened. Anyway, she also said that the Pope and the archbishops, they do not believe in Christianity. They believe in something else. They said Christianity is for the people, and we believe in something else. And she said she saw such things in the Vatican that she can't even discuss it because it's so disgusting, the things that she saw.
But did she tell you privately?
No, she wouldn't tell me.
What do you think happens there?
The Vatican is part of all of it.
Did you ever see any, let's say, religious representatives taking part in these rituals at Montauk?
I did. I'm not going to tell you who they are.
Not the Pope.
No. I didn't see him there, but there were other priests and other people of religious nature that were participating there. And it wasn't just only Catholic. There were many other religions represented there. The Vatican, how it got its name, it's built over an Etruscan cemetery dedicated to warriors who died in battle, whose soul was taken up to the goddess Vaticana into the astral levels. And so the Vatican is built over a graveyard dedicated to the goddess Vaticana. And that's how it got its name. Astral entity.
Very interesting.
On the other side, we have the Dalai Lama. And he's also part of that.
Is he really? Do you think that?
I know so.
How?
He is promoting the same thing the deep state promotes. And so is the Pope. Global government, totalitarian authorization. The Pope just mentioned, if you watch my podcast, there's my recent one, he just stated that there should be no sovereign states on the earth. There should be only a global government with people who tell you what to do and what to think, because the way people are now is not good, according to the Pope. So I would like to see the Pope take down the walls of the Vatican and allow the immigrants from Middle East to live on his property. I'd like him to take several thousand into the large Vatican and accept them as immigrants. I would like to see that.
That's probably not going to happen.
Right.
Now you're talking about everything that is happening on the surface of the Earth, but you've spoken a lot about hollow Earth and civilizations inside of the Earth. Can you please tell me what you feel about that idea? Do you think that there are civilizations inside of the Earth?
I don't feel, I know that there are civilizations inside the Earth. Some are human, some are alien, and there's all different kinds. It's very vast. Just like the surface of the Earth is vast, so is...
And it's hollow. And is there a central sun that somebody has spoken about, saying that there is some kind of...
Yes, I know they call it that. It's not actually a sun. It's the leftover molten material from when the planet was formed, which is suspended by centrifugal force in the center, so that inside the Earth is always light, there's no darkness.
But why do we never see beings or anybody from the inside of the Earth emerging to the surface?
Many people have.
Really? Yes?
Yes.
It's difficult when we are talking about in the field of UFO research and alien research about what's happening in the universe, because there's so little evidence, pictures or anything, let's just say solid evidence about the existence of extraterrestrials or UFOs?
All of these things are covered up. People who try to expose it are ridiculed and so on. But the time is coming, actually I think it's here, where they're starting to tell you, oh yes, there could be civilizations, there could be other beings. They're saying these things. Another Earth, they discovered this other Earth 2 and another Earth here and another one there. They already know these things. They tell you on the news all the time. So they're starting to give information that pretty much allows you to understand that we're not alone. Remember something, this galaxy has 200 billion at least stars. And there are 200, 300 billion stars that we know of. So how many civilizations are there? A lot. And then times that by infinite realities.
So is there hope for humanity? What can we actually do in order to, let's just say, break free from this satanic spell and all this darkness that we are uncovering in shows like these? What can we do, Stewart, to break free from this? Also maybe on Earth while we're here, but also when we leave the body.
We must do the work I mentioned earlier. We must discover who we really are, where we really came from, and what our purpose really is. And as I say, there's no need to fight against anyone or anything, but to work within to the God mind that's part of you, and to analyze self and release what you don't need. And yes, of course there's hope. If there was no hope, there'd be no need to exist. Give up. So we're here for a reason. We're always here to do something more than what we have done before. And so yes, I know that ultimately no one will remain ignorant. Everybody will know the truth and everything will change. Not going to be tomorrow probably, maybe not next week, but eventually, because of the experiences and because of the release of truth, people will understand and know. Now, you know what, Lucas? Not everybody's going to make it. A lot of people are leaving now because they don't want to deal with what's coming, because subconsciously they know. But the ones who remain, we are in a spiritual war. And there is no other solution that we are victorious.
So when people may become very fearful hearing all of these things that you've been revealing today, what is your best advice for them?
Use your fear as a motivation to release it, to find out the opposite of that, to find out the truth. But start with yourself. Start with you and where you come from. Go into your genetics, go into your mind pattern, do all the work that I have laid out, or do your other work. I have books and books and hundreds of videos to tell you how to do it. And it's up to you to learn it or not, to accept it or reject it. It's your choice, but it's there if you want it.
So if people want to learn more about your work and they want to purchase your books and read more and your seminars and lectures, and you're doing a lot of podcasts with your wife, Janet, how can they find you and how can they really get into your material?
Very simple, to go to the website, expansions.com. We also have several Facebook pages. YouTube, I have my own channel on YouTube, hundreds of videos on there, but I think it's best to start with Expansions website. And on there you'll find everything that you need, videos, books, etc., seminars. I'll be in Istanbul next week doing a seminar and so on. So, and Janet will be leading a group to the north of Italy next month. So there's a lot going on.
So you two are a great team flying all over the world trying to enlighten people about what is actually happening in the world.
Yes, we offer, and they can accept or reject. It's up to the person.
Stewart Swerdlow, it's been absolutely incredible, very fascinating, insightful, and mind-boggling. And I want to thank you very much for doing this interview with Age of Truth TV. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and good luck to you and Janet.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Stewart Swerdlow, and thanks to all of you for watching Age of Truth TV. We appreciate that very much. You can support us by clicking onto our website, ageoftruth.tv. And please subscribe to our channel, hit the bell for notifications, and like our videos. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon.